Hello, I'm Bakhtiar Sanovan. You're watching A News. Now let's take a look at today's top stories. Police make arrests over a huge fire in Hong Kong with dozens killed and many more still missing. Donald Trump calls for every Afghan national who entered the United States under Biden to be investigated after the shooting of 2 National Guard troops. And Pope Leo XIV meets Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan as he makes his first trip abroad since becoming pontiff. The death toll from a major fire in Hong Kong has climbed to 65, with 279 people still missing. The fire broke out in a public housing apartment block undergoing renovations on Wednesday. And authorities say the 3 construction company executives have been arrested on suspicion of manslaughter. Authorities say flammable materials at the site may have allowed the fire to spread quickly. Laura Westbrook has this report from the site of the fire in Hong Kong.
As you can see behind me, firefighters are continuing to spray these buildings with water, and smoke is still coming off these buildings. You can taste it in the air. This is still an ongoing rescue operation. Where I'm standing now, there are still dozens of fire trucks as well as ambulances with many firefighters still on scene. We are also hearing from officials that the investigation is now underway, and scrutiny is turning to the materials that were used in this renovation, with some of those materials which include protective mesh sheets as well as plastic. Those might have failed to meet fire standards. Also, styrofoam material was also being used in the renovation, and obviously that is highly flammable and may have been one of the reasons why this fire spread so quickly and so intensely. Police say that they have arrested 3 men on suspicion of manslaughter, 2 directors and 1 engineering consultant from the construction company, with officials saying that this investigation remains ongoing. Meanwhile, emergency shelters have been opened for those affected. Residents can also and loved ones can also register their missing loved ones and family members. One woman told me that she is worried because she still hasn't been able to contact a friend who lived in the building behind me. And so as the rescue operations are continuing, for those who are waiting for news, it is also a very anxious time. Laura Westbrook, A News, Hong Kong.
2 National Guard soldiers were critically wounded in a shooting near the White House on Wednesday. The suspect, identified as 29-year-old Afghan national Rahmanullah Lakanwal, is in custody with 9 life-threatening injuries. President Donald Trump has linked the attack to the Biden administration's immigration policies, calling it a monstrous ambush-style attack and vowing to review all Afghan entries under the previous administration.
2 National Guard soldiers were shot and critically wounded on Wednesday in downtown Washington near the White House. Investigators identified the suspect as Rahmanullah Lakanwal, a 29-year-old Afghan national. The suspect, who is in custody, was also shot and had wounds that were not believed to be life-threatening. Speaking in a video address from Mar-a-Lago on Wednesday night, President Donald Trump linked the shootings with the Biden administration and illegal immigration.
He was flown in by the Biden administration in September 2021 on those infamous flights that everybody was talking about. Nobody knew who was coming in. Nobody knew anything about it. His status was extended under legislation signed by President Biden, a disastrous president, the worst in the history of our country.
Shortly after Trump's remarks, Washington said it had stopped processing immigration applications from Afghanistan. Since then, the Trump administration has asked for 500 more National Guard troops to be deployed to D.C. The move comes after Washington previously asked a federal appeals court for the original number of soldiers to remain there after a judge ruled the deployment was unlawful.
President Trump has asked me, and I will ask the Secretary of the Army, to the National Guard to add 500 additional troops, National Guardsmen, to Washington, D.C. This will only stiffen our resolve to ensure that we make Washington, D.C. safe and beautiful.
Nearly 2,200 troops currently are assigned to the Joint Task Force operating in the city, according to the government's latest update.
Well, as a result of the shooting, the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services has suspended all immigration processes for Afghan nationals indefinitely. Our correspondent Tamim Bahiz has more details from Kabul.
Authorities say the shooting happened just blocks from the White House in what investigators are calling an ambush attack on Thanksgiving Eve. The suspect has been identified as 29-year-old Rahmanullah Lakhanwal, an Afghan national who entered the U.S. in 2021 under Operation Allies Welcome, the Biden-era program that resettled Afghans who aided U.S. forces during the war. Officials say Lakhanwal was wounded in an exchange of gunfire before being arrested. He had no known criminal history and was living in Washington state. President Trump called the shooting an act of evil, an act of hatred, and an act of terror. He said his administration would re-examine all Afghans who entered the U.S. during Joe Biden's presidency. Hours later, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services announced it had halted all Afghan-related immigration cases, saying the protection and safety of our homeland remains its priority, while security and vetting protocols are reviewed. A senior Trump administration official reported that Lakhanwal applied for asylum in December 2024 and was approved this April, 3 months after Trump took office. A News attempted to contact Afghan officials for comment, but has not yet received a response. So far, investigators have not yet identified a motive, and officials say the review of the suspect's background is still underway. Tamim Bahiz in Kabul, A News.
Ukraine says it will soon restart talks with the United States, and Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha says Kiev will push for real practical steps toward a workable peace plan. Speaking alongside Latvia's Foreign Minister, Sybiha said Ukraine expects tangible progress that could open the way to a future ceasefire. Latvia reiterated its support for the US-led efforts, while Russia signaled it will not offer major concessions following the leak of a call involving a US envoy allegedly advising Moscow. President Volodymyr Zelensky says he's ready to move forward with the US-backed framework and wants talks to include European partners.
There are no separate issues. Everything affects all of us, and everyone needs to be fully informed. We firmly believe
Tensions between the United States and Venezuela are escalating as Washington expands its military operations across the Caribbean. The United States says it's targeting what it calls narco-trafficking networks linked to President Nicolas Maduro's government. Maduro has rejected allegations accusing the United States of using military pressure and sanctions to undermine his leadership.
The United States says it stepped up military operations in the Caribbean, striking suspected drug trafficking vessels. Washington accuses Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro of ties to criminal networks, allegations he rejects. At a military hospital in Caracas, Maduro spoke out against sanctions and praised the perseverance of the country amid the American military buildup in the region.
With the sanctions from the years 2016, 2017 and 2018, which took away 99% of the country's income, we nevertheless persevered. And now we are finishing the year 2025 with an offensive of inaugurating public works. Let's keep building.
US maritime operations have intensified in recent months, destroying alleged narco-trafficking boats and killing dozens. Officials say the campaign targets criminal groups they claim operate with support from inside Venezuela.
And I want those watching who see the narco-terrorist drug boats blowing up to understand that we're deadly serious about this mission. And in understanding that, in waging this war on narco-terrorists, we're willing to go on the offense. Go on the offense in a way that changes the dynamic for the entire region.
Maduro says the US is using drug trafficking accusations as a pretext to undermine his government, insisting Venezuela will resist any attempt to remove him.
To Southeast Asia now, where days of relentless rain are causing widespread devastation across Thailand, Malaysia and Indonesia. All three countries are battling severe landslides and flash floods. The destructive weather has left more than 50 people dead in what authorities say is some of the worst flooding the region has seen in years.
Floods in Southeast Asia have affected 9 provinces in Thailand, 8 states in Malaysia and parts of Indonesia, leading to evacuations of nearly 45,000 people. Thailand has declared its southern Songkhla province a disaster zone after heavy rainfall left thousands stranded and at least 33 people dead. More than 2 million people in Thailand have been affected by the floods, but just 13,000 have been moved to shelters. Authorities in Thailand are using helicopters to evacuate critically ill patients from a hospital in Hat Yai. Floods and landslides killed at least 24 people and injured dozens after torrential rain struck Indonesia's island of Sumatra. Torrential rain has hit the region for several days, flooding parts of multiple districts since Monday. Heavy rainfall and flooding also damaged 330 houses and displaced 2,244 people in several areas. In neighbouring Malaysia, flooding from days of heavy rain swept through 8 states, with forecasters predicting more rain in the region in the coming days. At least one person has died in Malaysia. According to officials, extreme weather events may become more frequent due to global warming, with higher sea surface temperatures intensifying tropical storms.
The UK government has unveiled a £26 billion tax-raising budget aimed at funding welfare reforms and easing energy costs. The budget includes measures to cut borrowing, increase spending on public services, and removing the 2-child benefit cap from April.
UK Chancellor Rachel Reeves delivered her budget on Wednesday after the Office for Budget Responsibility accidentally published key details early, an error that overshadowed her speech. The budget freezes income tax and national insurance thresholds for 3 more years, introduces a new tax on high-value properties and applies a mileage-based charge for electric vehicles. Speaking in the House of Commons, Reeves outlined her key budget measures.
I said I would cut debt and borrowing, and I meant it. Because of this budget, borrowing will fall as a share of GDP in every year of this forecast. Our net financial debt will be lower at the end of the forecast than it is today, and I will more than double the headroom against our stability rule to £21.7 billion, meeting our stability rule and meeting it a year early.
Reeves said the budget would also tackle fraud and tax avoidance while helping working families, with energy bill cuts and freezes on NHS prescriptions and train fares. The removal of the 2-child benefit cap was welcomed by many lawmakers, But some Londoners expressed concern over the increased tax burden. Britain's fiscal watchdog has revised down economic growth forecasts, but confirmed the government's stronger fiscal buffer under the new plan.
Now, protests over upcoming spending plans have now reached Bulgaria, where thousands gathered in the capital to oppose the government's 2026 budget proposal. Protest organizers have cited higher taxes and social security payments among reasons for the demonstration. The budget raises government spending to 46% of GDP, largely funded through higher taxes and public debt. With the government holding a parliamentary majority, the budget is expected to pass. 3 police officers were injured during the protests. Turning to West Africa, and the group of army officers in Guinea-Bissau has seized power in a military coup days after presidential elections. In an announcement on state TV, they told viewers they had taken control and were imposing sweeping restrictions across the country. Here is more.
A group of military officers in Guinea-Bissau in West Africa say they have seized control of the country, detaining President Umaro Sissoko Embalo and suspending the electoral process just days after a tightly contested presidential vote. Gunfire was heard around key government sites in the capital, Bissau, including the Election Commission, the Presidential Palace and the Interior Ministry. Officers then appeared on state TV saying they had created the High Military Command, deposed the president and shut the borders to stop what they called a plot involving a well-known drug baron.
The High Military Command for the Restoration of National Security and Public Order has decided to immediately remove the President of the Republic, close all institutions of the Republic of Guinea-Bissau, suspend until further notice.
The takeover comes as Guinea-Bissau awaited preliminary results from Sunday's presidential election, due on Thursday. Both Embalo and his main challenger, Fernando Dias, had already claimed victory. Embalo later confirmed he had been removed.
I am the first president of Guinea-Bissau to vote for a second mandate, and I hope to continue like this because unfortunately none of the others managed to complete their mandate and then come back to vote. I hope everything happens in calm, peace and stability.
Government sources say Fernando Dias, former Prime Minister Domingos Simoes Pereira and Interior Minister Botche Kande have also been detained. The coup is being led by Denison Kanha, head of the Presidential Guard. Guinea-Bissau has a long history of coups and political instability. Embalo, in office since 2020, says he has survived several previous attempts to remove him.
After the break, we'll take a look at the key stories shaping the region. Stay tuned. Welcome back to A News. Now let's take a closer look at the key stories shaping the region. Pope Leo XIV met Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan in Ankara as he arrived for the first overseas trip of his papacy. The two held talks at the presidential residence, where they were expected to address regional tensions and the Pope's call for unity among Christian communities. Earlier in the day, the Pope laid a wreath at Anıtkabir, the mausoleum of modern Turkey's founder Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, and wrote a message wishing peace and prosperity for the country. The Pope will travel to Istanbul later in the day for church meetings and visits to major religious sites. On Friday, he is expected to continue to Iznik before departing for Lebanon to complete his regional tour. Now the Pope will visit several historic sites, from Istanbul's major churches to newly uncovered ruins in the country's northwest. Let's take a look at how the country has prepared.
Turkey has prepared for the arrival of Pope Leo, who is in his first foreign trip on Thursday before continuing to Lebanon. Authorities have closed several churches to visitors, stepped up security and set up medical teams ahead of his visits to the Sultan Ahmet Mosque, Mor Ephraim Syriac Orthodox Church, and the Greek Orthodox Patriarchate. A central part of the visit will be Iznik in northwestern Turkey, where the Pope is due to tour the submerged Basilica of Saint Neophytos. Archaeologists say the site is linked to the First Ecumenical Council held 1,700 years ago.
The First Council is a meeting where the fundamental principles of Christianity are laid out. Christians even refer to this place, the site of the First Council, as the birthplace of our religion. So, yes, let me also say that it is both the birthplace of their religion and the only meeting accepted by almost all denominations of Christianity, whether Catholic, Orthodox, Protestant, or even evangelical.
The basilica, usually underwater, resurfaced after being rediscovered in 2014.
We believe that after the mid-13th century or towards the end of the 13th century, the church was completely submerged, abandoned and forgotten until our discovery in 2014. It resurfaced with our discovery and is now a very important site for Christians and the Christian religion.
In Istanbul, church leaders say preparations have intensified, with extra security outside the Patriarchate and the Mor Ephraim Church, where the Pope will meet clergy and community representatives.
Let's go back to one of our top stories and live to Washington, D.C., where officials, including FBI Director Kash Patel, is holding a briefing on the investigation into the shooting of 2 National Guard soldiers. Let's take a listen.
To secure our freedoms under President Trump's brilliant leadership and administration. I'll provide an update on the case as follows. It is an ongoing investigation of terrorism. Make no mistake about it. The FBI is leading out on these federal assault on a federal law enforcement officer investigation on many fronts. We immediately, with our law enforcement partners in the Metropolitan Police Department and the interagency, secured the scene, seized the weapon, sent in our evidence response team immediately to collect evidence and started doing block-by-block canvasses. We are looking for and interviewing witnesses. The firearm and other materials have been sent to our Quantico laboratory already yesterday for immediate analysis. That work is ongoing. Partnering with the D.C. United States Attorney's Office, we have also executed multiple search warrants around the country to include the subject's last known residence, which is in the state of Washington. The search warrant was executed on that house last night or early this morning, and it is an ongoing process. All the individuals found in the house have been interviewed, and some interviews remain ongoing. We will not stop until we interview anyone and everyone associated with the subject, the house, and every piece of his life. There's also subject interviews, relations conducted in San Diego, pursuant to our ongoing investigation. So, as the judge noted, this is a coast-to-coast investigation being led right here in Washington, D.C., and this subject definitely did pick the wrong country. And we will rise together as a nation to show the world what we do here. And we are thankful that we have the Attorney General's brave leadership and President Trump's brave leadership and priorities to safeguard our communities. I also spoke to Director of the CIA, John Ratcliffe, last night, and Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth. There is confirmation now that the subject had a relationship in Afghanistan with partner forces. We are fully investigating that aspect of his background as well, to include any known associates that are either overseas or here in the United States of America. That is what a broad-based international terrorism investigation looks like. We will provide continuous details to the American public while at the same time not jeopardizing the ongoing prosecution to ultimately hold this perpetrator accountable in our courts of law. We will provide as much transparency as possible, but as you can see, the breadth and scope of this investigation will continue. We will continue to hit the streets and hit every town and every house and talk to every witness. The men and women of the FBI and the Metropolitan Police Department and the interagency, to include the Department of Homeland Security, DEA, and ATF, are working tirelessly on this Thanksgiving Day. And I know just by talking to the leaders behind me that instead of going on and being with their families, everyone rogered up and showed up to work today. And none of them want to go home. That's the resolve that we have together as a team to bring to you justice for this heinous act of terrorism here in our nation's capital. And as the judge said, we will ensure that our law enforcement partners are out there in full force to make sure the world can enjoy our nation's capital. We will not let this heinous act of violence prevent people from visiting our beautiful nation's capital. And we will also continue to highlight any evidence that we can publicly. And as the judge said, this individual is in this country for one reason and one reason alone, because of the disastrous withdrawal from the Biden administration and the failure to vet in any way, shape, or form, this individual and countless others, and this administration has taken the rightful step to stop any further allowance of people with this similar background into the country, and we're thankful for that. And as I said, this investigation remains ongoing, and I think I'll turn it over to General Blanchard of the National Guard now. Thank you.
Thank you, Director.
That was FBI Director Kash Patel addressing the U.S. And now we again return to our regional stories. Leaders of the Collective Security Treaty Organization countries met in Bishkek to counter transnational threats and strengthen regional security. They also discussed modernizing their armed forces and enhancing joint military cooperation. Our correspondent Fariza Kalimurzina reports from Almaty.
Russia has proposed a program to modernize the armed forces of the Collective Security Treaty Organization. President Vladimir Putin announced the plan during a meeting with CSTO representatives in Bishkek, stating that it covers rearmament, joint training of military units and special forces, regular exercises, the development of air forces, air defense systems, and mechanisms for deploying peacekeeping forces. The discussion also focused on protecting the western borders of the CSTO. Belarusian officials said that the deployment of the Oreshnik missile system on their territory is intended to defend the organization from the west in response to activity near its western borders. The CSTO summit was held in Bishkek, chaired by Kyrgyz President Sadyr Japarov. Leaders from Russia, Kazakhstan, Tajikistan and Belarus attended, along with representatives from the organization's secretariat. They discussed coordination on collective security, the leadership structure for the coming years, and plans for closer cooperation. From 2026, Kyrgyz representative Talatbek Masadikov will take over as CSTO Secretary General. Also, during the summit, declaration of the Collective Security Council was adopted, along with several documents aimed at improving the organization's operations. This included an anti-narcotics strategy, a 5-year military cooperation plan, and measures to strengthen partnerships with other international organizations, including the CIS and SCO. Meanwhile, Armenia, which suspended its participation in 2024, once again did not send a delegation. Earlier, Deputy Foreign Minister Mnatsakan Safarian explained that Armenia does not take part in CSTO decision-making, but does not block its work, following a foreign policy based on national interests, diversification and balancing. He also added that the country is not currently considering leaving the organization. And the next CSTO summit, where Russia will assume the chairmanship, is scheduled for November 2026 in Moscow. Fariza Kalimurzina, Almaty, A-News.
A seemingly routine diplomatic meeting in Tbilisi may have profound implications for the fate of regional trade and Georgia's place within it. As the South Caucasus enters a new era of shifting alliances and infrastructure deals, conversation between Washington and Tbilisi is worth watching closely. Nini Nikolashvili has more.
In Tbilisi, acting U.S. Ambassador Alan Purcell met with Georgian Finance Minister Lasha Khutsishvili. According to the U.S. Embassy, the two discussed strengthening bilateral economic ties, assessing the impact of U.S. sanctions on Russia, and exploring how Georgia might support the newly brokered corridor initiative, the Trump route for international peace and prosperity. Trip aims to link mainland Azerbaijan with its Nakhchivan autonomous region via southern Armenia, establishing a multimodal transport and energy corridor under U.S. supervision. For Georgia, this opens a critical question: Will Tbilisi be content watching from the sidelines, or will it maneuver to stay central to regional connectivity? Until now, Georgia has been a cornerstone of the so-called Middle Corridor, serving as a vital transit and logistics hub between Asia and Europe. Supporters of TRIP argue the corridor could reconfigure trade flows, offering a stable, US-backed alternative to routes passing through Russia or Iran. If Georgia aligns itself with TRIP-friendly infrastructure or logistics, for example by investing in link-ups, customs harmonization or transit services, it might not lose relevance. On the contrary, it could position itself as a complementary node, benefiting from spillover trade, investment and enhanced strategic importance. But there are risks. With TRIP bypassing Georgia, the country could see a reduction in transit revenues and lose some leverage over regional logistics. Moreover, dependence on corridor traffic that skirts Georgia might weaken its negotiating position in future regional deals. Finally, the geopolitics around TRIP are shifting, with growing Western influence in the South Caucasus and diminishing control by traditional powers such as Russia and Iran. As of now, Georgia has no formal role in TRIP. That makes this meeting significant. It might be Tbilisi's first step in deciding whether to adapt or risk being sidelined. Nini Nikolaishvili, Tbilisi, A News.
European and Central Asian officials have gathered in Tashkent for the Trans-Caspian Transport Corridor and Connectivity Investors Forum, focusing on new investments, modern logistics and expanding the region's links with Europe. Sevil Rajapova is in the Uzbek capital with more.
The Tashkent Forum brought together ministers, international financial institutions and logistics experts to discuss the future of the Trans-Caspian Corridor, a key road linking Europe with Central Asia through rail, sea and road connections. Officials say the region needs faster, modern and predictable transport systems to unlock new economic opportunities. For Uzbekistan, a landlocked country, improved transit links is essential. Better connectivity can reduce transit time, lower costs and open new opportunities for businesses across the region.
From east to west, the transportation takes more than 45 days. With these projects, Trans-Caspian and Trans-Black Sea projects, we would like to reduce these 45 days to approximately 10 or 12 days. So it will provide huge advantages to business world. So it's a very valuable project in terms of...
For Uzbekistan, a landlocked country, improved transit links is essential. Better connectivity can reduce transit time, lower costs and open new opportunities for businesses across the region.
According to our current projections, if today the volume of cargo coming from China through our territory stands at around 5 to 6 million tons, we expect this figure to reach 10 to 15 million tons by 2030 to 2035, and up to 30 million tons by 2040. To handle such a large increase in transit, we need to develop the necessary infrastructure in Central Asia. Once this infrastructure is in place, the true potential of the region will be fully unlocked. It will allow us not only to strengthen links with the European Union, but also to deliver goods efficiently to neighbouring and southern countries.
Financial institutions such as the EBRD say investment in railways, ports and multimodal transport is essential for making the corridor commercially competitive. The forum builds on last year's European Union Central Asia Connectivity Investors Meeting, where around $10.8 billion was mobilized for sustainable transport links. This year's discussion aimed to turn those commitments into concrete projects, from expanding port capacity on the Caspian Sea to harmonizing customs procedures and reducing transit times. Officials say that by improving transport efficiency, the region could significantly boost trade, attract new investment and strengthen integration with global markets. Iris Sevil Rajapova reporting from Tashkent, Uzbekistan, A News.
Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi visited Paris on Wednesday, during which he met with his French counterpart Jean-Noël Barrot. It's a rare visit which focused on Tehran's civilian nuclear program, as well as swap of their citizens jailed in France and Iran. Turaj Shiralido has more from Tehran.
Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi met with French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot in Paris on Wednesday in an infrequent visit by an Iranian top diplomat to the French capital in recent years, while exchange of Iranian and French prisoners, as well as Tehran's nuclear issue, topped their discussions. According to a Foreign Ministry press release issued in Tehran on Thursday, they reviewed developments in the West Asia, Russia-Ukraine war, international security, as well as the nuclear program of Iran. Araghchi and Barrot last met in September on the sidelines of UN General Assembly in New York, during which their talks focused on release and extradition of 1 Iranian and 2 French citizens. In the Paris meeting, Araghchi referred to the arrest of Iranian citizen Mahdieh Esfandiari and welcomed a French court's decision to release her on parole, calling for acceleration of the process of her acquittal and release. He told France 24 TV channel that Iran is ready for the exchange of French prisoners Cécile Kohler and Jacques Paris with the Iranian citizen, which he expected to take place over the next 1 or 2 months. Araghchi's visit to Paris came after France, together with Germany and the UK, known as E3, proposed a resolution joint with United States at the Board of Governors of International Atomic Energy Agency in Vienna last week, calling for Tehran's cooperation with the agency. During Wednesday's visit, Araghchi criticized performance of the European Troika at the UN Security Council and IAEA board meeting, urging a responsible and independent approach based on international law in accordance with Non-Proliferation Treaty. Turaj Shiralido, Tehran, A-News.
The 12th meeting of the Turkic State's Media and Information Working Group concluded with officials from member countries discussing issues including media cooperation, combating disinformation, and building a unified communication space. Our correspondent Aytan Shukurova has more.
Representatives from member countries are gathered to strengthen media cooperation, enhance information security, and shape a unified communication landscape across the Turkic world.
Cooperation within the Turkic world in general on a multilateral level and also on the scope of bilateral relations. It is very important, and that is a priority direction of cooperation. So in this sense, today's meeting is a very good illustrative example of how Azerbaijan, what attention Azerbaijan pays on the cooperation within the OTS.
We are adopting an action plan for 2026, which is consisting of certain programs and projects in the field of media sector, with particular attention to cooperation among news agencies and national TV institutions.
Following the opening addresses, participants review the current implementation of the 2025 action plan, begin refining the framework for 2026, and continue discussions around the draft communique for the upcoming ministerial meeting.
You can build a stronger ecosystem and a more professional media landscape, but today larger geopolitical forces also play a defining role. We have entered a phase where astropolitical dynamics are increasingly influential and extremely powerful.
Turkic states should exchange media content with one another. We have already signed several cooperation agreements, which marks a significant step forward for all of us. We look forward to sharing experiences and resources.
The panel delivers a strong message about how global information threats are rising rapidly. Speakers stress the stronger critical thinking and verification skills, accelerated adoption of digital media practices, and coordinated platforms to defend against information manipulation.
Now we'll take a short break. Right after the break, we'll discuss the Collective Security Treaty Organization Summit's new declaration, from backing an Armenia-Azerbaijan peace deal to expanding cooperation on regional security and migration. Stay with us. Welcome back to A News. Leaders of Kazakhstan, Belarus, Kyrgyzstan, Russia and Tajikistan have adopted a sweeping declaration at the Collective Security Treaty Organization Summit in Bishkek, voicing support for an Armenia-Azerbaijan peace deal and outlining deeper cooperation on regional security, migration and counter-narcotics. To help us break down the key takeaways, I'm joined from Belgrade, Serbia, by Nikola Mikovic, political analyst. Mr. Mikovic, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Mr. Mikovic, how significant is this new Collective Security Treaty Organization declaration in terms of regional security dynamics?
It's very interesting that their declaration does not mention the most important thing that's happening. That's the war in Ukraine. When NATO holds summits, and it held numerous summits over the past 3.5 years,
yes,
the major topic was always the war in Ukraine. Unlike NATO, the Russian-led Collective Security Treaty Organization does not even dare to mention Ukraine, probably because members of this organization will not back such a declaration. Russia and Belarus probably would, but others certainly wouldn't, because they never supported Russia's actions in Ukraine. So according to the official documents and their press release, they discussed everything except the war in Ukraine. Putin spoke about peace, the peace process and Trump's peace initiative, but that was after their summit. That was at his press conference. But during the official ceremony and their meeting, that topic was not discussed. Maybe they discussed it behind closed doors, but we're not aware of that. So they spoke about things that are not quite relevant at this point, again, according to the official press release that we got. And that tells you that the organization is not as significant as the Kremlin would like to present it to its audience and to the world in general.
So what does the CSTO's explicit support for an Armenia-Azerbaijan peace agreement indicate about the bloc's current priorities?
Now, given that Armenian representative was not there,
yes,
I'm not surprised that they adopted such a document. Maybe everyone would block it, maybe not, we don't know. But most members of the Collective Security Treaty Organization support the ongoing normalization of relations between Baku and Yerevan. That's the only thing that they can do, basically, because now it's the United States rather than Russia and its nominal allies that started playing the major role in this process, because recently Pashinyan and Aliyev signed peace treaty or peace declaration in Washington, not in Moscow, which means that now the region is effectively becoming part of Washington's zone of influence and its geopolitical orbit. I think Armenia will continue boycotting the Collective Security Treaty Organization summits in the future, and under the current circumstances, it is a matter of time before Yerevan withdraws completely from the Russian-led organization. We know the reason. They're unhappy about Russia's the role that Russia played during 44-day war in 2020 and later in 2023 when Azerbaijan resolved the Karabakh conflict in its favor. So now Yerevan is just trying to distance itself from Russia and from its from the organization led by Moscow, and consequently, I think Moscow is losing its influence in Armenia, and there is nothing the Kremlin can do about it at this point, at least.
Mr. Mikovic, the summit emphasized combating drug trafficking. Why is this issue gaining such prominence now?
I think it is important for the Kremlin because we know that narcotics go from Afghanistan through Tajikistan and then further north to Russia. So Russia tries to protect itself and that's one aspect of the role that the Collective Security Treaty Organization is playing. So its goal is to protect the Afghan-Tajik border, and that's one of the reasons why Russia has military bases in Tajikistan. Although we see that recently Tajikistan itself started normalizing relations with Taliban, which was not the case in the past. It is still not recognizing the Taliban as the de facto rulers of Afghanistan, but still they recently met with Taliban representatives and they started holding talks. I think one of the issues that they discussed, I'm talking about Tajik and Taliban representative, was narcotics that go from Afghanistan to Tajikistan and then further to Russia.
Okay, and what does President Vladimir Putin's proposal for a large-scale program to equip CSTO allies with modern Russian weaponry suggest about Moscow's confidence in the combat effectiveness of its arms?
I think it's a wishful thinking. I think Russia is not in a position to sell weapons to all those countries because it's fighting a long war in Ukraine. It can supply some weapons to its nominal allies, but not as much as it did in the past, because it needs weapons for itself, because it remains bogged down in Ukraine and it needs those weapons to continue fighting. I think Putin is actually just trying to preserve some influence that Russia still has in countries such as Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan, because in Kazakhstan, Russia is dramatically losing its influence. And Kazakhstan is also developing closer ties with NATO members, particularly the United Kingdom and the United States, which is, it can be considered a humiliation for Moscow and a geopolitical defeat in reality. But when it comes to weapons, yeah, I think Russia will continue supplying weapons to its allies, although not as much as it would want and not as much as they might want, because other actors like Turkey, for instance, started playing a significant role in this process, and it's selling weapons to CSTO members, which is, again, very humiliating for Russia. Now, just trying to imagine any NATO members purchasing weapons from Russia now when the war in Ukraine goes on.
And
it's hard to imagine.
Okay, and how would you describe the current internal cohesion of the CSTO based on this summit?
Well, I don't see any divisions except for the fact that Armenia did not participate, but other members are more or less loyal to Moscow, especially Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan. Kyrgyzstan is also very important in this case, because yesterday Putin and President Japarov met and they signed numerous documents. So I think Russia at this point can count on Bishkek's loyalty, but other countries are just trying to distance themselves from Moscow. Even Belarus, because Lukashenko recently said that he wants to normalize relations with the United States and possibly with European countries, with neighboring Lithuania and Poland. So I don't see any division, as I said, in the Russian-led organization, but it's not as efficient as Kremlin would like it to be.
Mr. Mikovic, finally, what should we watch for next in terms of follow-up steps after Bishkek?
The war in Ukraine will go on, and the Collective Security Treaty Organization will continue turning a blind eye to what's happening there, because Ukraine continues attacking Russia, which is, of course, response to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. But still, the fact that not a single CSTO member supported Moscow clearly tells you that those countries are only Russia's nominal allies, but in reality, they're not. They're just trying to remain neutral, and they're not taking sides in this war, which means that Russia does not have any true allies, except maybe North Korea.
Thank you very much for talking to A News. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
You're up to date with World News for the hour. Thank you for watching and stay tuned to A News for more.